Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I didn't hear the door creak open. The rain outside had softened into a whisper against the windows, and my playlist was deep in one of those slow, haunting piano pieces that made everything feel suspended in time. I lay curled on my side, the blanket pulled halfway over my hip, headphones snug in my ears, lost in thought more than sleep. That's when I felt him. Not heard, felt. The air changed. The quiet warmth of the guest room thickened with his presence before I even turned my head. My breath caught, sharp and quiet, as a flicker of awareness danced across my skin. I opened my eyes. He stood just a few feet from the edge of the bed, not moving. Not speaking. Just watching. Like he wasn't supposed to be there. Like I wasn't supposed to look up and meet his eyes. But I did. His gaze dropped instinctively when he realized I saw him, then lifted again, slower this time, with something deeper behind it. Not guilt. Not fear. Just a heavy, electric silence that buzzed between us like something waiting to ignite. Neither of us said a word. Maybe it was the way the warm lamp on the dresser caught the edge of his face, softening the sharp lines I knew too well. Or the way the sleeves of his white t-shirt were slightly damp, clinging to his arms like he'd just come in from the kitchen after rinsing a dish. But it felt personal. Intimate. Like he wasn't a guest in our home. Like I wasn't just her, someone's wife. And he wasn't just him, someone's husband. I tugged my blanket slightly higher, more out of reflex than modesty. But the motion drew his attention lower. Just for a second. Long enough to notice. My cheeks burned, but I didn't look away. His hand, slow, deliberate, rested on the footboard, knuckles flexing, thumb brushing over the wood like he was steadying himself. Not touching me. Not yet. But close enough to suggest he wanted to. The room stayed quiet. Except for the distant notes playing in my headphones and the sound of our breathing, mine fast and shallow, his held tight like a confession. A single step brought him closer to the bed. My fingers curled against the sheets. His eyes searched mine for something, permission, maybe. Or a signal to stop. I didn't give either. I just watched, still, as if movement might break whatever spell had wrapped itself around us. And then, the bedroom door creaked louder behind him. A sound from the hallway. He froze. I blinked, heart pounding, the tension snapping back like an elastic band stretched too far. The moment cracked, but it didn't disappear. It hung there, between us, like a secret neither of us could pretend didn't exist anymore. The first time I noticed him watching me like that, it wasn't even about attraction. It was something quieter. Sadder. We were in the kitchen. I was drying dishes while everyone else laughed in the living room. He had offered to help, just out of habit, maybe, but when I handed him a plate, our fingers brushed. It was small. Nothing. But he flinched like it meant something. And when I looked up, he was already looking at me, like he wasn't supposed to. I should have turned away. I should have handed him another plate and kept my eyes on the sink. But I didn't. That moment became a pattern. Him finding reasons to linger in a room a little longer than necessary. Me not moving away fast enough. The warmth of his hand on the small of my back as he reached past me. The soft laugh we shared when we both reached for the same cabinet. Our knees touching once under the table and neither of us pulling away. And maybe it was just loneliness. My husband and I hadn't really seen each other in months. Our conversations had become logistics. Groceries. Work schedules. Whose turn it was to drive the kids. But he noticed things. When I changed my hair. When I stayed up too late. When I laughed but didn't mean it. And that noticing became dangerous. Tonight wasn't supposed to happen. He said he was going to bed. I said goodnight. But I left the door unlocked. Maybe on purpose. Maybe I was testing something I didn't want to admit. When he took that step toward the bed, everything in me tensed, not out of fear, but anticipation. He leaned down slightly, just enough for his breath to graze the curve of my shoulder. My breath hitched. His hand hesitated, hovered, then gently rested on the blanket over my hip. It wasn't what he did, it was what it meant. Then, just as slowly, he pulled away. He didn't speak. Just turned and stepped back like it took everything in him to stop. And I didn't follow. I couldn't. My chest was tight. My skin still buzzing. I lay there frozen, watching him disappear through the barely open door. A second later, my phone buzzed. One message. From her. The next night, the house was quieter than usual. Everyone had gone to bed early, too much wine with dinner, maybe. The lights were dimmed, the air still humming with summer warmth, and the silence between walls felt heavier than ever. I wasn't expecting him. But when I stepped out into the hallway to get water, he was already there, leaning against the wall near the linen closet, hands in his pockets, looking like he had been waiting. Neither of us spoke at first. The only sound was the faint ticking of the hallway clock and the soft hum of the ceiling fan above. My eyes searched his, looking for a reason to turn back, a sign he would. Instead, he reached for the glass in my hand, his fingers brushing mine. Slowly. Deliberately. The skin-on-skin contact sent a ripple through me, subtle but sharp. I didn't let go of the glass. He didn't pull it away. I couldn't sleep, he said, voice low, almost hoarse. Me neither, I whispered, without thinking. A moment passed. He moved closer. Just a step, but enough to shorten the space between us into something dangerous. His hand hovered near my waist, hesitant. Then finally rested there, fingers splaying slightly, like he wasn't sure if he was grounding me or himself. My breath caught as he leaned in. His face was so close I could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the crease at the corner of his mouth. His gaze flicked to my lips, then back up, questioning, careful. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushing the shell of it. I closed my eyes briefly, just long enough to feel the weight of the moment. He whispered my name, almost like a secret. When I opened my eyes again, he was barely an inch away. I didn't move. Neither did he. It was a standoff of restraint, one filled with heartbeats, unspoken questions, and everything we weren't supposed to want. His hand moved from my waist to my back, slowly sliding across the fabric of my shirt. My own hand, unsure and trembling, found his wrist. Not to push him away. Just to feel him there. Then, his lips parted. He leaned in, just close enough to feel the heat of his breath brush mine. But before contact could be made, knock knock. A hard, impatient sound from the guest room at the end of the hall. We both froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. He stepped back, jaw tense, eyes flicking toward the sound. I should go, he whispered. I nodded, barely breathing. But even as he walked away, the heat of his touch lingered like a secret on my skin. The morning light came in soft and cold, unlike the warmth of the night before. It slipped past the curtains in long golden strips, landing across the foot of the bed and catching on the edge of the nightstand where someone had left a glass half full. I sat up slowly, still wearing the same oversized shirt I'd fallen asleep in, only now it was wrinkled, off one shoulder, the collar stretched where fingers had clutched too tightly. He wasn't there. The space beside me was still warm, the sheets creased, faint impressions left in the pillow. But he was gone. My heart knocked hard against my ribs. For a moment, I just sat there, blinking, waiting for something to shift, maybe a sound from the hallway, a knock at the door, his voice whispering my name again. But nothing came. Instead, I pulled the sheet up to my chest and stared at the ceiling. What had we done? Or maybe the better question was, what had we almost done? Because I didn't remember crossing the final line. I remembered trembling hands. Heavy silence. Lingering closeness that stretched into the dark. His forehead against mine. My fingers fisting the back of his shirt like I didn't want to let go. I remembered falling asleep like that, tangled in tension, not desire. But that didn't make it innocent. And it didn't make it right. I found him in the kitchen 10 minutes later, shirt half buttoned, standing at the sink like he'd been there for hours. The coffee machine was still on. 2 mugs sat on the counter. Only one had been used. He heard me come in, but didn't look up. "Hey," I said, barely above a whisper. His shoulders stiffened. He turned slowly, eyes tired, jaw clenched. There was a streak of sunlight across his cheek, and I noticed how quiet the whole house was, like it, too, was holding its breath. "I didn't mean to fall asleep," I offered. Useless words, hanging in the air between us. "I know." He finally looked at me. Not with anger. Not even with guilt. Just pain. Like he didn't know how to hold what we'd become in his hands. "Do you regret it?" I asked, and instantly wished I hadn't. He hesitated. Then walked past me, picking up his coffee. "It's not that simple." I stood there, unsure if I wanted him to say more or say nothing at all. The silence stretched again. He glanced back at me one last time, his voice rough. "We can't keep doing this," and with that, he left the kitchen, his footsteps quiet, the door clicking softly shut behind him. But even in his absence, the weight of his presence stayed. In the scent of his coffee. In the way my skin still remembered where his hands had been. And in the ache that came from not knowing what we were now. The rest of the day moved like glass, fragile, reflective, easy to crack. By noon, the house had filled back up. Voices. Clinking dishes. Footsteps overhead. I went through the motions, helping with breakfast, folding blankets, pouring coffee I didn't drink. And every time I passed him, every time our paths crossed, it was like being dragged underwater. He didn't speak to me. Not once. It was like it never happened. Like the night before had been a dream. Like my heart hadn't pounded against his, like his fingers hadn't slipped beneath the edge of my hair, like we hadn't breathed in sync in the dark, afraid to move or speak. And I might have believed him, his silence, his performance, if it wasn't for the look. He didn't touch me, but his eyes did. Every time someone else got too close. When my husband wrapped an arm around my waist in passing. When I laughed too loudly at a joke someone else made. I could feel him watching, jaw tense, hands shoved too deep into his pockets. His smile didn't reach his eyes. And then came the twist. I was clearing plates from the dining table when her voice dropped beside my ear. "Were you in the guest room last night?" she asked, light and curious, too casual. I froze. My hand gripped the edge of a plate too tightly. "No." "Why?" She shrugged, wiping her hands on a towel. "I thought I saw a shadow in there when I got up to check on the baby." "Probably nothing." Her tone said one thing. Her eyes said something else entirely. I nodded slowly, my mouth suddenly dry. Maybe the wind pushed the door open. "Yeah," she said, her smile stretched thin. "Maybe." She turned and walked away. I stood there for a moment too long. Then turned, and he was standing across the room, watching. He had heard. Our eyes met across the table. The noise around us faded. For a second, it was just us again. And that's when he did it. He smiled. Not big. Not obvious. But it was the kind of smile meant only for me. A secret. A confession. It undid something in me that I'd spent all morning trying to hold together. I swallowed hard and looked away, but my pulse was racing. Later, in the quiet of the hallway, I pulled out my phone. My fingers hesitated. My heart screamed don't. But I typed the message anyway. I miss you. Even when you're right there. I stared at it, thumb hovering. And then, I pressed send. A second later, my screen flashed. Message sent, to her name, not his. My stomach dropped. My breath caught. The hallway spun. The silence in the living room was heavier than any scream. She held the phone in her hand, her phone. The one I had accidentally sent that message to. The words were still there on the screen, glowing like fire. I miss you. Even when you're right there. Everyone else had gone to bed. Just the three of us now. Me, him, and her. She stood frozen in the doorway, expression unreadable. Her eyes flicked from me, to him, then back again. That silence between us didn't break, it shattered. What is this? She asked, barely above a whisper. But it was louder than any yell. No one answered. He stepped forward slightly, breath shallow. It was a mistake. That word, mistake, felt like ice down my spine. She held the phone up. So I'm just crazy, right? Just imagining it? No, I whispered, unable to lie anymore. You're not. Her lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She turned to him, the fury building now, slow and simmering. You were in that room last night. He didn't deny it. That was all the confirmation she needed. Suddenly, she threw the phone. It hit the wall with a sharp crack and clattered to the floor. He flinched. I stood still. You both lied to me, she said, voice shaking. In my house. In front of my daughter. You smiled. You laughed. You played pretend, like none of it mattered. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't speak. You think this was love? She demanded. You think stolen looks and silent nights mean anything when it's built on betrayal? He looked down, ashamed. Breath catching. I never meant for it to happen, I said quietly. She turned toward me, finally, fully. And this time, her voice broke. But it did. The air between us was scorched now. Nothing to save. No defense left. He stepped between us. Please, let's just talk. But she shook her head. One tear slid down her cheek. No. I'm done talking. She looked at me one last time, eyes full of pain, and something deeper. Then, just before she walked out the door, she said it was never supposed to happen. And just like that, she was gone. The door closed softly. But it felt like a door slamming shut on everything we'd become. The house felt colder in the days that followed, not because the weather had changed, but because everything inside had. The laughter was gone. The warmth of shared meals, late-night conversations, the small, comfortable silences, they all vanished. What remained was a hollow echo of what once felt like connection. I stood by the kitchen window one morning, watching the trees sway in the breeze. Leaves drifted slowly to the ground, like pieces of something beautiful that had come undone. Behind me, I heard footsteps. He walked in quietly, without his usual presence, like he didn't know if he belonged here anymore. I'm leaving tomorrow, he said after a long pause. I didn't answer. I found a short-term rental. Just until things settle. Still, I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I owe you an apology, he continued, voice low. Not for what I felt, but for how it all happened. I finally turned. His eyes were tired, softer now, like they'd seen something they couldn't unsee. I think we both knew it couldn't last, I whispered. He stepped closer, not touching me this time, just close enough to feel familiar. I didn't plan any of it, he said. But you made me feel seen again. I nodded, tears catching in my throat. And you made me feel wanted. Silence fell again, heavy but honest. I still think about that night, he admitted. I still feel it, I whispered. Every time I pass that room. He looked like he might cry, but didn't. I wanted to say goodbye. I reached out then, brushing his hand softly, just once. Not to start anything, but to end it with something gentle. I hope you find peace, I said. I hope you forgive yourself, he replied. And then he walked out. This time, I didn't watch him go. I just stood there, surrounded by the quiet, the sunlight warming my skin, and the ache of something real that was never meant to survive. We had broken something, but we had also uncovered truths we couldn't ignore. And in that way, we both walked away changed.